So I'm sure by now you've heard of the bugs that have plagued Marvel Spider-Man 2. I'm coming at this with a different approach, especially when it's something that I can, in a sense, see exactly what I think is going on. And because of the work that I've been doing in learning game development, I can see where these issues are probably stemming from. And at the same time, I have to be, in a sense, objective as much as I possibly can. Many of you know that I'm upset with Sony right now. Many of you know in my last few videos of Spider-Man, I said, I'm not going to play this game day one because it gave me a copyright strike that they didn't give other YouTubers a copyright strike for. They basically played favoritism, but a lot of 20-year-old Spider-Man fans and maybe 18-year-olds, I don't know how old you all are, but you acted like little children. You insulted me and, you tried to drag me on the internet, but one thing about life is, people have opinions and people are passionate. In fact, I even commended the Spider-Man community because their passion is really, really huge. I wish that, for the most part, the DC fan community could have this kind of passion. I think we'd probably have a different atmosphere surrounding conversations of our favorite superhero games. Nevertheless, I wanted to talk about this because I think I know where a major culprit comes from. I have a lot of respect for Insomniac Games. In fact, the fact that Brian Intihar and his, other developers have mentioned that the Arkham games were a huge, huge inspiration for the Spider-Man games gave me a lot more respect for them, and I'm rooting for them to win. However, I think that they're in a very interesting predicament. Now, as for the bugs in this game, there are actually numerous bugs, and a lot of people have actually been experiencing them. Now, before you jump in and say, well, the bugs have only been minimal and are isolated to specific people who may be trying to cause these bugs, don't fall for that. Games usually come out and they have bugs. No game is perfect. There are some games that have come out basically with almost no bugs and you wouldn't be able to tell, like Hi-Fi Rush, but those games are usually smaller in scope. But the moment a game starts to basically scale higher, what you're going to realize is there is a lot, and when I mean a lot, of possibilities to see bugs show up in these games. I've been gathering them video, some of them, pictures, just to make sure that, somebody doesn't come out here and then tell me nonsense and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I've just been quietly watching to see. Another really interesting thing, too, is even after the patch, there still have been bugs that have shown up. John Linneman of Digital Foundry, I said John Linneman, I can't remember his name, but he's a Digital Foundry guy. He wears glasses. He's one of the two guys that wears glasses. I just don't remember his name right now. But he came out on Twitter and also said that apparently it seems like the bugs are still showing up even after he's got the patch in. So it seems like the problem is much deeper than just, say, isolated to a lot of people. And this is where I'm kind of going to in this video. Another really interesting thing, too, that we have to talk about is the possibility that, like Mortal Kombat and many other games that have come out this year, Marvel Spider-Man 2 was probably rushed, or at least it was let out of the oven without it being fully complete. And that's a likelihood. We've seen that with a lot of video games. Few developers take the time to go back and make sure everything is polished 100%, but for the most part, it appears that when publishers are starting to say the game's got to go out, the game goes out. However, I have to be fair, even if I'm mad at Sony, I have to be fair at Insomniac in this particular area. I think their Q&A could have done a better job in ensuring that their game had a higher fidelity before going out. It could also be that the Q&A teams did not get the proper funding or time that they needed to be able to test a lot of things. It could also be that this was possibly a version that they knew that they could ship while they're working on other things. And so when publishers said, it's time to go, this is the version they decided to ship, and QA is working on, say, the other aspects of the game to be able to go ahead and fix it at the end of the day. Now, here is where I think we have a culprit that no one is really mentioning, and that is the console itself, the PlayStation 5. I know I've gone back full circle to come back here again because I think with the bugs that we're seeing, it appears to me that the console is possibly not loading its data properly. Something even also stood out, even in ACG's podcast. He had a lot of different people show up and they talked about their experience with the game. I thought that was quite peculiar because if you actually go ahead and listen to what it is that they said, I thought it was quite interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to that segment of what it is that they said in the video. And so I'll let you guys go ahead and watch it for yourselves. You'll draw your own conclusions. Just a few minutes. Bear with me as we go ahead and play this.
Yeah.
You said you got a bunch of graphical bugs. What did you mean by that,
I'll
Abzy?
give you like an example. It's not like a huge deal. It just happens somewhat frequently. One of them was you're biking with someone, and then he was biking, like his legs animation were at a different rate than the biking, the actual
Oh,
bike's
like it was unsynced
pedals.
almost? Yeah.
So it was unsynced, stuff like that. There's like
That is an animation bug. The animation and the bike itself are supposed to sync together, but it appears that because you have two different assets and you have all kinds of interesting skeletal points, basically bones, they're probably just not loading properly. This can be seen whenever the device that's loading all of that data is probably having to deal with so many things at the same time. There's no cause for alarm. I'm just saying that it appears to me, from what I'm seeing, that the hardware is just probably not dealing with this game as it probably should. And maybe the scale of the game is indicative of that. But let's keep listening and I'll jump to that later on.
like there's just random fucking, like, cyberpunk T poses, random like clipping things, like big clipping things, um and yeah, and just like some odd thing, nothing major. The only major thing that happened to me was the crash, and I crashed, I died in a thing, and then when it was reloading, it just yeah, it just crashed, hard crashed.
Wow. Okay. I didn't get
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
What about you, Johnny? What any new bugs, any more bugs, less bugs graphically, anything?
Nothing so far. No.
Oh, really? Okay.
No bugs, but again, very early.
Yeah, right. But and Silver, you
This is a very interesting statement, but again, very early. I don't know what he means by that. Possibly he may have gotten a review copy, and in their review process, usually sometimes video game publishers will give you stipulations. They usually tell their, reviewers that, hey, we're working on some of these bugs that you're going to see. So the version that you're reviewing is not final. And so possibly by the time your review is out, these bugs may have been fixed. Keep that in mind. Or they say, we know of 1, 2, 3, 4 bugs that we're going to solve by the time game launches. So things may be arbitrary. So I'm just kind of throwing a guess out there. Nothing concrete, just throwing my guess out there.
said you had some.
Yeah, strangely, I haven't had any like visual ones, but I've had some pretty huge one with like triggers and stuff. Like I had one where I've had few where I come out of a cutscene and I can't move.
Oh,
One time, it didn't even spawn in like the model of the character, so it was basically just like it was first person, but I couldn't move at all.
that to me is saying that the hardware is not loading in the skeleton and the model, the character pawn properly. And in my opinion, like I said, as I know Insomniac needs to hold their weight on this, but I strongly believe that all the elements are already in the game, saying that, one person is not getting these bugs and another person is getting the bug. Could be that as the game is trying to run these processes, depending on the progression of the player, it's having a hard time, following gameplay cues. Like he said, those triggers. So you get out of a cutscene, you're no longer in the cutscene, you can't see your character. And there was a bug that actually showed up that your character looked like a sugar cube. This was one bug where somebody went in the menu and they got out of the menu, and what it was like a little pointer thing that was like something that was used to prototype or used to run tests. This is something that you see in a game engine. So for some reason, it just loaded the base level of what the character's movement component is. This is weird. But as somebody who works on game development in Unreal Engine, I saw that and I was like, oh, that just looks like dev environment type stuff. And I was just in my mind going, wow, something bigger is happening here. This is not necessarily 100% the developers didn't, make their game, because again, it's subjective that one person actually experienced it and another person did not. So again, my hypothesis seems to me like it's getting close to, hot in terms of how much I'm kind of dialing into this. Let's keep listening though.
Um, so weird stuff like that, where I have to then just reload the checkpoint, and hopefully and thankfully it fixed itself. I also had one where there are sometimes side events where you have like a red exclamation mark that you have to put out a fire or something.
Okay.
And that red.
I think we've heard enough. I mean, we already see that this is something that's going on. Now, my hypothesis is that the PlayStation 5 is probably not handling this particular game as much as it should. Because this game, as much as people may already have, said or concluded that it is a shorter game, it is. The game still has a bigger scope than the other Spider-Man games. And I'll explain simply because you not only have, Marvel Spider-Man 1's character, you now have both Marvel Spider-Man characters in the same game. You have their progression and their sequences somewhat intertwining with each other. So this particular game actually has more parameters, more data, more unique data sets that it has to work with. Peter leveling up and Miles leveling up, and Peter attaining progress somewhere, and Miles attaining progress somewhere, and Peter's own combat moves and Miles' special abilities. And then even in some cases, and I don't want to spoil it for you, you have some things that are even out of place that, you didn't have in the other games. And when I say out of place, I don't mean out of place in a bad way. I mean out of place that they're surprising in a good way, actually. And they add more value in terms of playtime for the players. You see that these things are actually now new to the game itself. So already there is a huge bundle of data that this game has to load and progress with over time. I think gamers need to understand that whenever you're looking at a video game, you must be willing to look at the nature of the game in its unique sense. This is the only way to make sense of why a video game behaves the way it behaves. Are these bugs going to be fixed? Of course. What's going to happen is they're going to go and restructure code. They're going to go and restructure implementation on how some things were done. And a lot of these things are probably going to disappear, say, in the next few weeks. Some of them, nonetheless, seem like they will require going into the overall code base of the game to work on. But it's not anything that, you'd write home about in the sense that, oh, this is the worst thing ever. However, this is something we also have to pay attention to because for the most part, PlayStation has marketed quality as this focal point of all its video games, when in reality, its developers face the same challenges like every other developer. And those who have said, well, making these games exclusive gives these developers more time to be able to focus on these games, I think you're probably maybe in a sense making light of the capabilities of developers. Developers, for the most part, need one major factor, and that's time. If this game had, say, possibly one more year, I think it would have come out way polished because they would have been able to figure out, okay, maybe we need to implement things differently. A lot of the way the game plays, according to that gentleman on that podcast, I'm sure some of you heard what he said. Some of the triggers not going away and so on and so forth. These are things that can happen in terms of the way the game will load, these parameters and load progress. And so I'm certain that they would have figured out a way to say, okay, maybe we need to load things this way in order for the game to be able to progress. So this is where I see the problem happening. Another thing, however, too, is I'm, in a sense, somewhat disappointed overall as to how the community has kind of handled these releases by PlayStation and by Xbox, because that's pretty much what's at stake here. There's no need to sit here and talk about the bugs in Marvel Spider-Man 2 without talking about why we're actually seeing them so pronounced, because it's the fact that many people, possibly on the Xbox side, are calling them out in a very exaggerated way. Exaggeration is not always bad, but sometimes exaggeration can be way out of line. But you have to keep in mind that the exaggeration comes from a place where most Xbox folk have pretty much been abused over the last few months for everything that Microsoft has done that people in the industry do not approve of. At the same time, many of them feel the need to reciprocate back to people who may lean on the Sony side. So this is just a tit for tat that's going on. And at the end of the day, it actually brings engagement. So you're going to see this continue. And this is the nitpicking that I actually kind of warned about in the times of Gotham Knights, the kind of nitpicking that I warned about in the, when Starfield was out here. And I said, everyone is being super picky about loading screens and all of that. But loading screens can actually be very good for your game because you can actually properly load data when it's time for you to do so that you don't have skeleton issues. But here's the thing too about, a lot of these collision bugs that we're seeing and, clipping bugs and so on and so forth. The funny thing is, as I was playing Starfield, I only encountered one major bug, and that's when I was playing on my Series X. When I loaded the game on PC, the bug never reared its head again. That's when I knew this was a performance-based, skeleton or, character asset bug where the character is not loading in. And the bug was very interesting. Whenever I would scope through, look through a scope for a weapon, my character's head would disappear, and then he'll be still. I could not progress. I had to reload the save file, and it kept happening over and over again. But then when I just basically turned the game off, fired it up on the PC, I never had that problem again. I was like, man, this is possibly the Series X being weak and not loading the data properly for this character to actually be able to take out this NPC or use a scoped weapon and then, continue from there. So I stopped playing the game on the Series X entirely, and I just stuck with playing the game on PC. And even on PC, there's actually a bug that I got to see in Miles Morales that was also a clipping bug as well. The bug is really funny, and if you actually pay very close attention, you'll realize that it actually happens like somewhere around the beginning of the game. This is my PC version of Miles Morales. I haven't really played it on PC. I did beat it on PlayStation 5 when it came out. But I saw it when we were doing one of these mission chases. Miles goes in, he takes out the bad guy, he's fighting with them. But then here's what happens. He's over here trying to stop the car. And, you're pushing, your prompt and everything before you know what's going on. The car clips into a police car. And, it's in the air. So there were bugs in Miles Morales as well, even on the PC version. So yes, maybe I may make the case to say the PC version is the better version and so on and so forth, because the PC has, depending on the PC you're using, it'll have more power to be able to run the game. But at the end of the day, game development is not necessarily the easiest thing. You can make a game to the best of your abilities, even though the game may be polished, pristine, built on, a lot of the parameters of, different games, and you still may just get it wrong, or some things may just not act well, if you get what I mean. And by the way, in case you were wondering, I think I was playing this on I don't know if it was a 6800 XT, my build, or my 4080 build. I can't remember. So this was not like a small computer. I mean, I do video production, and I build my computers to be able to handle whatever way of production, and I also do game development. So I don't necessarily buy gamer grade computers, even though the one I'm using right now is a gamer grade computer, but I like to build them kind of beefy. So seeing this kind of throws that argument away, saying, oh, the PC version will be better. It's just a product of a game that has a high scope, a wide and a broad scope. You're going to see these things happen. But nonetheless, it's very interesting to see that, Sony's claims of quality are just a marketing, terminology more than anything else. If any other developer had time, as much as, many other developers do, or if they had similar circumstances, they'll be able to put out a really good product. But I think Insomniac, they need to be held to a higher standard because they produce for a single platform. I get it, but then at the same time, I just think their publisher probably didn't give them as much time as was needed to be able to finish their product, But again, like I said, I just want to be measured in the way I actually talk about this, because I really have a lot of respect for Insomniac, as much respect as I do for, good old Stefan Hill's Rocksteady. The new Rocksteady, they're yet to prove themselves to me, because Stefan Hill's left, so we're resetting all that. We're resetting all that goodwill to a lower percentage. Let me put it that way. I'm not resetting it to 0, but it's gone down to like 40%. So they'll have to put up with the Suicide Squad game. But we'll talk a little bit more about this stuff once I get my hands on the game. Again, I said I was going to not play it day one, but it's still on the agenda. We'll see when I have some time to actually dedicate to it. Today is a busy day anyways, but having been looking at everything going on, I thought we'd put a little bit of, sensibility to the conversation. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. Hopefully we'll talk in another one. Peace out.